We are the football guys of IDP. I'm your host, Joey Haggan, aka Joey the Tooth. And alongside me, I have my co-host, my good friend, the waiver wire miracle man himself, Kyle Bellefeuil. Let's get into it a little bit. Kyle, what is the most important thing before you even get into a startup?
Most important thing, you'll hear it a bunch, I'm sure, as we go through. And if you've ever done anything around IDP, startup, redraft, whatever, know your scoring, know your format, know your league. It's just paramount, man. It's the number one thing to do right off the bat.
Yeah, 100%. IDP it's so customizable. It's just like you could have one league that's tackle heavy. It's like just get yourself a thumping linebacker, and that's it. That's all you need, and you'll win your leagues. Then you have guys who are putting premiums on cornerbacks with like passes defended and whatnot. I know the IDP guys did that with their IDP Invitational. They put a little more emphasis, so made cornerbacks more relevant. So it's just understand your scoring before you go in. Just pay attention to that, study it, know it, and that'll make building your roster much easier. At the beginning of the draft, it's your typical super flex tight end premium. You have quarterbacks going off the board. First 5 picks, quarterbacks, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert. Not surprised. And then you have Chase and Jefferson in the first round. And then you also have mixed in Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and Deshaun Watson with Christian McCaffrey towards the tail end. So there you go. You have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quarterbacks in the first round. 2 wide receivers. Obviously, it's Chase and Jefferson. Not a surprise there. From then on in, you see a nice mixture, mostly a lot of wide receivers and running backs with your top-tier tight ends, Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle, Pitts, Hawkinson, Goddard. Those guys, those are the tight ends that always go off. After that, the tier break is so far that once Goddard's off the table, you pretty much can just wait on tight end. We're going to jump right here to the 7th round, the 10th pick in the 7th round. Cali King 49er, he went with Micah Parsons. Not a bad pick. Micah Parsons, I think I have ranked as my number 4 overall IDP. So my only issue here is I look at his roster above that. He has 2 running backs, good running backs, McCaffrey and Najee Harris. 2 great tight ends. He's got Kelsey and Pitts, so that's pretty good for your tight end premium. But he only has Kenny Pickett as a quarterback, and his only wide receiver is Christian Kirk. So I understand you want to grab an elite IDP here, but for me, looking at who's still there, like George Pickens was still, or let's see, no, Pickens already went. So after Parsons, you had Jameson Williams was still there. You had Treylon Burks, Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Deontay Johnson, Calvin Ridley. All these guys are legitimate wide receiver 2s, high upside wide receiver 3s. So before I go and grab my IDP 1, I want to make sure I at least nail down a nice wide receiver 2. And Christian Kirk, honestly, is really more of a wide receiver 2, 3, and he's his wide receiver 1. So I think I might actually go offense there and wait another round. But other than that, it's pretty close to the time you're going to want to take an IDP. So if you go a couple picks later, so we'll jump to me right here at the end of the round. So I have 2 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers, and 2 running backs. So there you go. There's my core offense. Obviously, all the upper echelon tight ends are gone, so I'm not worried about taking a tight end here. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take my IDP 1. I'm going to take Roquan Smith. He's there. So now I have my offense set, and I have my top IDP asset. If we look at our friend Matt Montgomery here, also he's in the 11th slot. He's from our football guys as well. He jumped as well. He grabs my DL1, Nick Bosa. So what would you rather choose? Your choice, Kyle. If you had the choice between a linebacker or a defensive lineman, because we won't talk about defensive backs yet, but for your first IDP pick, do you want linebacker or defensive line, and why?
I generally will go for an edge rusher or defensive end, but it's I always take the tiered approach with mine. My IDPs. So like I like the difference making edge rushers because the elite guys are difference makers, and that is Micah Parsons, where now he's going to be, he basically was an edge. The discussion of him being a linebacker edge is over. He played 80% of his snaps,
right,
on the DL last year. So, Parsons, Nick Bosa, who had a monster year, led the league in sacks with 18 and a half. Just a fantastic year. Myles Garrett, back-to-back 16 sacks, the last 2 seasons, back-to-back years with 16 sacks. And then Max Crosby. Crosby has just emerged into that top tier for me. So those 4 guys, if I can get one of those edge rushers, I'll jump at those. Mm-hmm. And if they're gone, then I'm looking at linebacker. Then I'm looking at Roquan, Nick Bolton, those guys. That's how the next tier changes for me. And there'll be pass rushers mixed in with those linebackers in my next tier. But Roquan would have been my pick after those guys.
Yep. Yeah. Me personally, I like to have myself 2 like stud linebackers.
Right.
So when you're playing in a lot of times in sleeper, when they have like defensive tackles, outside linebackers, and defensive ends pretty much grouped into that DL group, there's a plethora of defensive linemen. Mm-hmm. So with the way the NFL is going right now, with so many defensive backs on the field, a lot of teams playing a lot of nickel and dime packages as their base. That 3-down linebacker has become less and less common. So if you can land 2 stud 3-down linebackers, 100% snap guys that are just producing, you can kind of wait till the later rounds to grab some high upside edge rushers and kind of hope for hitting late. But I understand if you have the ability to take Bosa, Garrett, Crosby, even Aiden Hutchinson, I would be kind of tossed between that. But I'm still going with my linebackers to start. They are your biggest scorers in IDP, and I just had to go Roquan here. So if you look. Round 8, you have Roquan Smith, Nick Bosa, Nick Bolton, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Aiden Hutchinson, and Foye Oluokun. So that's 8 of the 12 picks in the 8th round were IDP. So that's where you can see that's your sweet spot. That's where people start grabbing the elite IDPs. Now, once you get that first round of elite IDPs is off the board, strategy kind of changes a little bit again. So if you look the next round, you had 4 more quarterbacks come off the board. You had 4 running backs come off the board. So after that huge run of IDPs, all of a sudden everybody's jumping back to offense, which that's kind of the good thing about being on the ends of the draft. It's like you can start runs and then be the benefactor of the entire thing. So you can start your IDP runs. So if you say you have offensive targets that you're worried about getting picked, if you can start an IDP run that get everybody worried about missing out on the elites, once that gets back to you, there's your 2 upside offensive picks. So I went Rachaad White with Tampa Bay, Fournette being released, and then Kadarius Toney being pretty much, the de facto number 1 in Kansas City at the moment. So here, my offense is pretty much set. I can move on and just hammer out IDP. So that's my goal here. So looking at what went before me, I didn't see anybody in any tier that really made me think that, shoot, I need to really jump and I really need to grab some of my guys. So I saw what was still available. So I said, let me get my upside offensive guys, bolster that offense and a little bit of bench, and then I'll just start hammering down my IDP from there. So, and you can see that it's kind of mixed from there, and strategy kind of flows and it looks like it's a tiered ranking approach. It's all rankings approach at this point because now you have IDP, wide receiver, and you have running back. It's all mixed through here. Your random tight ends seem to just drop off after that Goddard. It's so crazy. Evan Ingram and Pat Freiermuth went, but after that, they disappear.
I think it's really important to take what the board gives you, especially at this point, because like you said, you kicked off that run in the Mace took Parsons in the 7th, and then it went offense, and then you kicked off. Everybody at that point is waiting. When's the IDP run coming? And you kicked it off with Roquan, which is I like that pick. And then that round was 8 out of 12 IDPs, and then when we swung back, it was offense again. And you're going to see like the zigging and zagging like that. So you got to take what the board gives you. But since I went Crosby, then I circled back to get my QB2 for super flex. I got Geno, and then I grabbed Levis as a young guy to have on my bench. Hope he figures it out and whatever. But then since I had taken Crosby and I went edge first, I wanted to get 2 solid linebackers. So then I went Fred Warner, who I mean, Fred is as consistent as there is since he's been in the league. He's out there every down, just rock solid. You put him in your lineup, and he's steady Eddie. And then coming back, I ended up with Bobby Okereke, who just signed with the Giants. Yeah, dude, I love that landing spot. Getting him as my LB2 here, he landed the sweet deal for the Giants. They've been looking for a linebacker, and that they've churned and burned some pretty rough options there at linebacker, and they finally
seriously,
yeah, right. I mean, Tate Crowder,
England Smith was your top linebacker.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not great. So they get Okereke, they get their guy. He's gonna be set up real well there to be a really nice linebacker option for us. So I got Warner and Okereke, so I was pretty happy to get two anchor linebackers for my roster, and then I was like, if I generally do like to get another young edge guy, get two solid edges, two solid linebackers to kick off my IDPs, because DB is deep.
Super deep.
You can wait, and you're going to get just solid options late, and you can find options in season. There's just plenty of them. So if you score your corners correctly with passive defense and stuff, they're relevant. In a lot of leagues we play in, and the safeties too. You can find the safeties deep. So yeah, I usually target edge. I like to fill my edge in linebacker spots first. But if you want to go grab Derwin James, I'm all for it too. So
all right. So I want to talk about kind of true position and how that changes things a little bit. Mm-hmm. So true position is your interior. Your DL is your defensive tackles and your 3-4 defensive ends. And then your edge defenders are your 4-3 defensive ends and your 3-4 outside linebackers. So how does that change your approach when you're looking at when you're looking at the sport? All right, so this is what I'm looking at. So with Sleeper, they have outside linebackers as DL. So that's it's like a poor man's true position. So the reason I go linebacker heavy is, so look at this draft board. In the 12th round, I land Danielle Hunter. He's probably my DE 6. Mm-hmm. Then you jump all the way down to the 14th. I grab Alex Highsmith. I believe he's my edge 10. And then Sam Hubbard in the 18th. So he's I believe my 12th. Yeah. So I have 3 of my top 12 edge defenders going, and I get them in the 18th round. So then that allowed me to grab Logan Wilson, Roquan Smith, and then I went with a little bit of upside here. Kind of crossed my fingers on this one with Frankie Louvu, but yeah. I have two of my top 4 linebackers. Logan Wilson, he's my 4. Roquan Smith's my 1. And then I was able to land 3 of my top 12 edge defenders, but I didn't have to jump for them. So the fact that there's DL is so wide now with outside linebackers being included that you don't necessarily have to jump. You can load up on your linebacker position, and there's still going to be guys available later in the draft. So that's the approach I took here. And Sam Hubbard in the 18, I feel like that's an absolute steal. The guy's a tackle machine. He's anywhere between 60 and 75 tackles the past 3 years, and he's been anywhere from 4 to 9.5 sacks. So yeah, upside is there late in the drafts for these edge defenders. So you just need to pay attention to your rankings where you have these guys and see where the board's going. If linebackers are going, make sure you get some linebackers, because there's going to be plenty of edge defenders later in the draft. For reference, if you really want to look, in the 21st round, you had Cameron Jordan. Cameron Jordan has literally been like a 45 tackle, anywhere between 8.5 and 13 sack guy for 10 straight years now. Yeah,
doesn't miss a game.
And so and you're landing that in the 21st round,
right?
So I guess what I'm really trying to say is load up on positions that are a lot more scarce. Load up on your offense. Grab yourself some stud linebackers, and just know that there will be guys later. Sure, they're not going to be world beaters, but they're going to be guys that allowed you to get the world beaters at every other position. So that's my main strategy when it comes down to having true position outside linebackers as defensive linemen. So does it affect the way you draft at all?
Yeah, true position does change a little bit, and for me, it's the defensive tackle position, because like as you said, true position, you split out, you start linebackers, edge defensive end. That's like you laid out, Joey, the 4-3 defensive ends, 3-4 pass rushers, outside linebackers are defensive ends, and we just had that changed with if you're playing on my fantasy league. Shout out Gary Davenport, finally got what he's been pushing for the last few years to get those guys switched, so we don't have to worry about the position designation anymore when scheme changes, players change teams and all that. So yeah, linebackers, the DEs, edge guys, defensive tackles, corners, and safeties are all started by themselves. They're broken out. They're not grouped together. So the biggest change for me is the defensive tackle position. So like in the sleeper format, the defensive tackles are grouped in with the edge rushers. And it can lessen the value of some of the guys. The top guys are still super productive in this format. Aaron Donald's still a beast. DeForest Buckner, Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones, he had 15 sacks last year. Those guys still have value, obviously. But when you have them broken out in true position formats where you have to start 2 defensive tackles, say, in your roster, there's not that many big difference makers at the position. It's one position where you can still find a positional advantage. So I will target one of those difference makers at defensive tackle in a true position draft. Whereas in this, format, not necessarily looking at a defensive tackle per se, with my first edge defenders, unless it's one of those elite guys. I mean, if you want to grab Quinnen Williams, absolutely, the dude's a beast, and he's 24 years old, 25 years old. Those guys still stay strong in this format, but when they're broken out, they have more value because there's such big difference makers at their position. So that's the one big change for me is the defensive tackle position when we're looking the groups format and the true position format.
All right, so let's take a look at defensive backs a little bit. So what we're going to do is, if you look at the tail end of this draft, I've scrolled down and we're looking at the tail end of the draft. Buda Baker in the 18th, Jesse Bates in the 20th, Grant Delpit even in the 22nd. I mean, unbelievable value. Brandon Jones in the 23rd. Sure, he's coming off the ACL, but he was phenomenal when he was playing. Kevin Byard in the 21st. I mean, look at all of these guys here. They're all top 10 defensive backs, and you're getting them from the 20th round on. So if you want to grab yourself Jeremy Chin, Derwin James, Jalen Petre, you can. But I'm saying load up otherwise, because you even have guys like L'Jarius Sneed. He's a slot corner, and he was almost the DB1 last year. So there's just all over the place. Think about the amount of defensive backs that are on the field at a time. So just take that into consideration, and they all get targeted. So if you're playing in these big play leagues where passes defended are jacked up around 3-4 points. Cornerbacks are huge, so that just makes the pool even deeper. So defensive back, sure, you can go and try to grab the DB1, DB2, but I'm always passing just because there's so much late value. I think my last picks are generally defensive backs. I might take one littered throughout there, but there's just so many that I'm going to load up my bench on every other position before I even start thinking about defensive backs. Same for you?
Yeah, for sure. There's a ton of value to be had late. Like you just named off some really solid dudes that were in the latter part of this draft, and it's the same approach. Really not sweating when the defensive backs are coming off the board. If you like you said, if you want to grab Derwin or Chin or whatever, all for it. They're really good players, really productive. They're gonna look nice in your lineup for sure. If you don't get them, the top few guys. I'm waiting all day. Look, I mean, like you just laid out, there's just tons of value late, positions deep, and if injuries strike, you can find plenty of guys on the waivers, and if guys aren't producing, you can find replacements all season. Like you said, there's tons of coverage players on the field, and slot corners are super productive, and safeties as well. It's grab them late and don't sweat it if that's your last position because you'll find some value.
Yeah, 100%. So what we try to do here is just kind of give you a quick breakdown, crash course, how to value all the IDP positions. Find that sweet spot. Looks to be the 8th round. That's your sweet spot to start drafting your stud IDPs. Build your offense early. Get your tiered rankings going. You can get all of our rankings at footballguys.com. I know me and Kyle both have them going. I have projections up right now. And anything else you can add?
Oh, no, I think you nailed it. Tier your rankings, check out the rankings so you know all these players fit. And when the board's coming to you, like you said, I like to look at those elite edges early, but there's plenty of value late if you don't get them. And it change gears quickly. Turn to linebacker once those guys come off the board, look at edge later. But I'm focusing on edge and linebacker first, waiting on DB last, build your offense, get that strong offensive core, and then look for IDP. Like you said, the sweet spot looks like round 8. And, if you're new to IDP, it might seem like a lot, learning a whole nother side and new players. But once you get into it, it's a lot of fun. And I tell you what, as the season goes on and you start learning these guys and you see how your rosters form together, it makes Sundays that much more fun, man.
You can find Kyle on Twitter at KBelf54, and you can find me at Twitter at Joey the Tooth IDP. Make sure you're subscribing to the Football Guys YouTube channel and the website. Like I said, there's just tools galore. And we'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully we can help you out and get some more life in IDP.